Hello and welcome back to another episode of leaguE Talk, the podcast all about management, coaching and all things League of Legends. My name is AJ, and on today's podcast we'll be talking about something that is massively overlooked within the esports industry. It's something that is all to do with your posture. Now, posture, what does posture mean? It generally refers to the way you sit or stand when you're doing things. So for example, your posture when you do a deadlift is often people refer to form, but in essence it is posture as well. But obviously what we're going to be focusing on is the posture when it comes to you sitting down. So how do we sort of dissect this? But we will dissect this into lots of different ways. We're going to use the book The Mental Edge by Kenneth Baum, which I've talked about before, but we're going to talk about the effects of good posture on your body and the physical effects of that, what good posture can do according to The Mental Edge, in terms of confidence, positivity, and we're going to talk about the actual science behind good posture and then how we achieve decent posture. But before we get into anything, I want you guys to think of something now. Now, if you're watching or listening to this, I want you to think of someone who has just won, right? Someone who has just won a game. So whether that's a tennis game, a tennis match, whether that's a football match. And then next to that person, I want you to think of someone who has lost. And I want you to keep both of those in mind. Now think of the way they hold themselves, their facial expressions, all of these different sort of things, okay? And now keep that thought with you. And we're going to touch on that towards the end of the episode, okay? But keep that with you now. So, the actual effects of good posture. Now this is all to do with physically, nothing mentally for this part. So the effects of good posture is it keeps your muscles and joints in alignment. It can decrease the stress of joints and ligaments at the same time because, you know, when you sit or stand properly, your body sorts itself out. It's in the right position, the position that it's intended to be in. It can prevent fatigue due to your muscles being used more efficiently, and it can prevent back and neck aches as well as headaches. So if you're getting a lot of headaches and you're sitting at the computer, it might have something to do with the fact that your posture isn't good enough. Maybe your neck's pointed down and your chin's towards your chest, for example. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the book by Kenneth Baum, and we're going to talk about his idea of changing your posture to change your game. Now there are several incredibly important messages that he gives across when it comes to posture. And the first main takeaway is what it does to your opponents. Now this is a bit of a difficult one because in esports this is not always the case, but if you're on stage, for example, this is fantastic. This might be something that you translate into different aspects of your life, however. Now in some cases, less so nowadays, but in traditional sports, players in football or American football or rugby, for example, after they've been tackled, they would pop straight back up and they would jog back to where they would need to be. Now what this does is it gives off the impression that no matter what you can do, you as my opponent can't hurt or affect me. Your physical posture, therefore, is not only one of the quickest ways to influence what your opponents think, but also how you feel about yourself. Now that is split into two parts. So the first main takeaway is what it can do for the people watching you, the people around you. If you're on a trial, for example, and you're working out of an office, if you have a good posture, you're sitting up strong, people will have a different opinion of you. Fact. Now, how you feel about yourself, this sort of boils down to personal changes. Now, mentally, what your posture can do is vast. Okay, so the first thing that it can do is it can greatly increase your self-confidence. Now, in esports, this is quite a big issue. A lot of people deal with social issues, anxiety, stresses, depression, things like that, much like people do in every aspect of life. But in esports, posture is a real tangible way that can really increase your perceived confidence and ability in yourself. So Kenneth Baum asks a question. If you're a man and walk like Clint Eastwood or Sylvester Stallone, what starts happening to your thinking? Now, if you don't know who these people are, they're two big actors. Go and look up Sly Stallone. He was Rocky. And this resonates with the idea of a great pretender. You pretend something that he talks about the great pretender. And if you're pretending about something, it can really help you embody that person. So if you start to embody the way that Sylvester Stallone stands and walks and the confidence that he has, it's going to change. Now, with the right posture, a lot of things can change. So you're breathing in more. We'll talk about the science later, but it can really increase your self-confidence, the worth that you have and the ability you perceive you have. So that's a really, really interesting one for me. But the most interesting one is to do with positivity. Now, the University of California in San Francisco launched a real big study into this, and it's been found to lift mood and even change states of depression, your posture this is. So the University of California in San Francisco's researchers found that those who were experiencing low mood had telltale signs of this. They had their head down, their shoulders slumped, They had high and shallow breathing, and they looked physically stressed with some form of a contorted facial expression is the way they described it. I presume that just means they didn't look very happy. But they found that much of depression changed, and that was the exact wording that Kenneth Baum used, by the act of shifting their posture. Now, this seems crazy. You shift your posture and all of a sudden you're cured? No, it's not quite like that. But this is the strength of what this really can do for you. Now, when they shifted their posture by thrusting their shoulders back, they lifted their chin up, and they kept their eyes focused ahead of them. And sometimes they would smile and even have deeper breath. And this genuinely affected their mood. You could see it, it was measured. So it can really increase your positivity. Now, what does this do for esports? Now, positivity is really important in the likes of tilt, in the likes of burnout, in the midst of a loss, for example. So you want to stay as positive as you can. Now, we've spoken about all the different ways that you can stay positive, like exercise, breathing, meditation, mindfulness, all these wonderful things. But positivity can really come from the way you hold yourself. Now, if I sit back in my chair, I push my shoulders back, I push my chest out, my chin's up, and I'm looking towards the camera. Yes, this is a video and audio podcast. So the video is up on the YouTube channel, the podcast is all over the different podcasting sites. But when I do this, all of a sudden your positivity increases. Now, this is really, really interesting. But let's talk about the actual science behind posture, okay? So the brain needs 30 times more blood than other organs do. Therefore, you can't afford to interfere with this blood flow. This is something that is incredibly important, and even more so in esports. Esports is so brain focused and so not physical most of the time that it's really, really different. Now, the posture can affect circulation massively, and especially to the brain. So if you have poor posture, the blood flow that goes to your brain might be affected. Now, when your posture is askew, and what I mean by this is something like hunched shoulders, if you have kinks in your neck, maybe your chin's really low, you may be putting pressure on the major arteries that lead to your brain. Now, don't worry, you're not going to die, but you're going to be restricting the blood flow. So the result of this is an inadequate blood supply. And that's not good, obviously. We spoke about the importance of how your brain needs an awful lot of blood. But what can an inadequate blood supply do? It can cause several things. For example, it can cause clouded judgment, forgetfulness, and sometimes even stroke-like symptoms. So obviously stroke-like symptoms is a bit more physical health than anything, but let's think about clouded judgment and forgetfulness. Now, if you're playing League of Legends and you've got a poor posture, all of a sudden your judgment might be clouded because your brain is not getting the blood flow that it needs. You might become forgetful. So maybe you were tracking your mid laner's summoner spell, and at 3 minutes they flashed, but you forgot that it was at 3 minutes and thought it was 2 minutes. So they might not have flash, they might have flash, for example. Maybe it was 4 minutes that you thought it was. The clouded judgment might be that you're looking for a team fight and you think everyone's ahead, but in fact your judgment has been clouded. You're not as ahead as you thought. So these are real things that can genuinely affect the game, and it's not really anything that people think about, okay? But it's a difficult one. How do we achieve good posture? Now, I'm going to talk you through it. So, how do we achieve good posture? Your head to be in a neutral position with your chin slightly up. More so making sure your chin's not down, but your chin's slightly up. Okay, try it now while you're listening or watching to this. You want your chin slightly up with your head in a neutral position. Roll your shoulders back, chest push out, and there's a couple of other things. So for example, your knees need to be below your hips. So you can do that by, if you're sitting with your feet on the floor, push your feet underneath your seat, and maybe put your feet underneath in the most comfortable way possible. All of a sudden your knees drop below your waist and your hips, and your monitor should try and be at eye line. Now the monitor being at eye line is a bit more difficult because that's not always so easy, but putting your head in a neutral position, rolling your shoulders back, pushing your chest out, and having your knees below your hips, while sitting comfortably, of course, and you're back in a sort of neutral, comfortable position. You don't want to be like that, of course, hunched over. But these are some real ways that we can achieve a better posture. Now, doing this as much as you can is important. It does involve a little bit of core strength, but every time you think about it, just try and sort your posture out. If you've noticed that you've slumped, just push it back into place. That's a really good way to do it. But that pretty much sums up the majority of what I wanted to talk about. It's a shorter podcast today, but one that I think is massively value-ridden. But let's come back to our opening thought. What does a winner and what does a loser look like? How much does posture really show when you're a winner? When I envisage a winner, I think of someone that's standing tall, maybe their arms above their head, celebrating, pumping fists. The loser, on the other hand, quite different. Noticeably, their head's down, their shoulders are slumped. There's lots of different ways that you can describe it, but hopefully you guys have now the same opinion of what a winner and a loser might look like. And if you want to become a winner, one way that you can really do that is through your posture. So you can preempt the fact that you're going to win with your posture. And I want you to keep this thought with you. Now, while you sit in your chair and you use the cue of starting up a game, this is something that I think is going to be really, really big. So every time you start up a game and you play a game of League of Legends, I want you to just readjust your posture. It's a really good way of a cue to a reward, to a reminder, for example, to just sort your posture out and be in a better place physically. I think it's a really good way to do it, but I want you to keep these thoughts in your head. Now, if this podcast has been interesting to you, if you've got any value for it whatsoever, let me know. I would love to hear from you guys. You can get in touch with me at leaguE Talk Show on Twitter. I've got some wonderful announcements coming out soon for me personally, or at leaguE _talk on Instagram. Now, hopefully you've listened to this for a couple of episodes. If you haven't, go and check out some other ones. There's some great episodes. The most recent one with a guy called Zen, who's now the head coach of Fenerbahce Esports. So go and check that one out as well. But if you enjoyed this, let me know. Leave a review, leave a like, subscribe, whatever you need to do. I would really, really appreciate that. Give me some feedback. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have, let me know, and I will see you on the next one.